Buenas. I'm Vanessa, the host of Chicklet, a podcast where I share my unfiltered reviews of books that I think Latinas, women, and millennials would enjoy. Please subscribe and follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, and YouTube at Chicklet Podcast, and enjoy today's episode on Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt was born and raised in Indianapolis and attended Cornell University, but withdrew in January 1943 and enlisted in the U.S. Army. As part of his training, he studied mechanical engineering at Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Tennessee. He was then deployed to Europe to fight in World War II and was captured by the Germans during the Battle of the Bulge. He was interned in Dresden, where he survived the Allied bombing of the city in a meat locker of the slaughterhouse where he was imprisoned. After the war, he married Jane Marie Cox, with whom he had 3 children, and adopted 3 of his sister's sons after she died of cancer and her husband was killed in a train accident. Jesus. There are 221 pages in the book. This might be the shortest book I've ever read. I did read My Sister, the Serial Killer, but that was 226 pages. So today's book, I think, wins the shortest book I've ever read as an adult. The genres are science fiction, historical fiction, and war. According to Wikipedia, it's a 1969 semi-autobiographical science fiction-infused anti-war novel. It follows the life and experiences of Billy Pilgrim from his early years to his time as an American soldier to the post-war years, with Billy occasionally traveling through time, and his survival of the Allied firebombing of Dresden as a prisoner of war, an experience which the author Vonnegut himself lived through as an American serviceman. The work has been called an example of unmatched moral clarity and one of the most enduring anti-war novels of all time. It was Kurt's first novel to become a bestseller, staying on the New York Times bestseller list for 16 weeks and peaking at number 4, and has appeared on Time magazine's list of 100 best English language novels written since 1923. I'm wondering what happened in 1923 that made that year so specific. In celebration of Banned Books Week, a bookstore called Politics and Prose Bookstore tips its cap to the books that have offended, outraged, and generally poisoned the minds of the masses with creative expression. They say, though their selections make great kindling, they assure us that they're much more enjoyable when read. Kurt Vonnegut's World War II classic was variously challenged, banned, and burned across the United States from 1972 onward. The book was banned in Levittown, New York in 1975, North Jackson, Ohio in 1979, and Lakeland, Florida in 1982, for its explicit sexual scenes, violence, and obscene language. Slaughterhouse-Five was challenged as recently as 2007 in a school district in Howell, Michigan, because the book contained strong sexual content. Upon reviewing the book, the county prosecutor concluded, after reading the books in question, it is clear that the explicit passages illustrated a larger literary, artistic, or political message and were not included solely to appeal to the sexual interests of minors. So they were not successful there. We love banned books over here. This episode is not a happy one, but it's heavy and deep, and I think part of the reason why I wanted to cover this was to change the narrative behind chick lit. Yes, the genre is typically about romantic relationship, female friendships, and overall struggles in humorous, lighthearted ways. But as our society progresses, women are able to be informed, have opinions, and go against the grain. And I think this entire book is against the grain during that time. War is never ending, and I think it's a disservice to not include these topics in media that's geared toward women. Let's get into lo bueno. In the foreword, a man named Kevin Powers describes a scene in the Iraq War where he sees an elderly couple with a white flag trying to drive away. He declared to his crew not to mind them because they weren't a threat. A soldier in another crew was analyzing the situation as well and declared the opposite, so that man's crew killed the elderly couple. Kevin shares that the old couple has been dying in his mind every day for the last 14 years, and that they will be dying in his mind until he's exhausted his own days on Earth. He says, I don't know if being there in that place makes me a bad person, but on most days, I think it means I don't get to claim to be a good one. And I just appreciate that this was added to the book, because while he was talking about the Iraq War, this entire book is written about World War II. It's just very senseless and disheartening that these things happen. It's just the common theme across all wars. Kurt writes, I have told my sons that they are not under any circumstances to take part in massacres, and the news of massacres of enemies is not to fill with satisfaction or glee. I have also told them not to work for companies which make massacre machinery and to express contempt to people who think we need machinery like that. In the book, he touches on consumerism in America and how we're all trying to fill voids with things found in gift shops. So, in other words, meaningless crap. He mentions Palestine, religion, how classism benefits the ruling rich class, how humans need to come together as one, how poverty affects those who are intentionally marginalized. He talks about how time is a made up construct and we need calendars on our walls and watches on our wrists and now phones in our hands to keep track of time. He's implying that they're unnatural and made up. In the copyright section of the book, before the book officially begins, it says Slaughterhouse-Five is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents either are the products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. And it's kind of difficult to remember that as you read, considering the narrator seems to be the author, Kurt, and like he's recounting his life story. The book is about Billy time traveling between different times of his life. He goes from when he was a baby, being cared for by his mother, to him dating his future wife, his time in a mental health institution, his time during World War II, witnessing concentration camps, being a prisoner of war, his adult life after his wife passed, and his daughter now caring for him while he's trying to spread the word of the aliens, and his time being in a human zoo for those aliens, the Tralfamadorians. While you're reading the book, it's easy to pick up on which point of time he's in now, but it was hard for me to pick up on a timeline of his life because it bounced literally like all over from one paragraph to the next, and it wasn't separated by chapters. The narrator goes through Billy's thought process to kind of calibrate where he is. So, for example, in one scene, he was a prisoner of war and he walked through a door to go to the bathroom, and the room he walked into was the bedroom of his honeymoon. So I think the author did a really nice job of not making it confusing or giving us whiplash from one scene to the next. But like I said, like it's kind of hard for me to decide the chronological order of his life. Billy had a sad boy vibe to him the entire book. Several times throughout his life, he expressed how unenthusiastic he was about living. He expressed this during the war, which I think is understandable, when he was in the mental health institution, when he was held captive in the human zoo, when he was working his amazing job with 5 doctors working under him, owned businesses, made lots of money with his wife and kids and a beautiful home, and most shockingly, when he was just a small boy and his dad threw him in the pool so that he'd learn to swim. And when someone jumped in to save him when he sank, he said how he was almost disappointed that someone saved him. Like, that's so sad, but also relatable. Like, it's not funny. It's not funny, but I think that it's relatable that we have all felt really bad sometimes. But this man is constantly, his whole life, like, damn. The overall vibe of the book reminds me so much of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or A Series of Unfortunate Events with Jim Carrey. It's just very awkward, quirky, eccentric, ironic. It's dry and dark. I personally enjoy that type of entertainment, but just so you know, so you're aware. Let's talk war stuff now. Billy was drafted into World War II and goes through horrendous circumstances, everything from being held prisoner, being shipped from one location to another like cattle, seeing dead people, the way they used the bathroom when they were being transported, the food they had to eat, the smells. At one point, he sees World War II backwards. He says this: American planes full of holes and wounded men and corpses took off backwards from an airfield in England. Over France, a few German fighter planes flew at them backwards, sucked bullets and shell fragments from some of the planes and crewmen. They flew backwards over a German city that was in flames. The bombers opened their doors and exerted a miraculous magnetism which shrunk the fires, gathered them into cylindrical steel containers, and lifted the containers into the bellies of the planes. The steel cylinders were taken from the racks and shipped back to the US, where factories were operating night and day, dismantling the cylinder, separating the dangerous contents into minerals. Touchingly, it was mainly women who did this work. The minerals were then shipped to specialists in remote areas. It was their business to put them in the ground, to hide them cleverly so they would never hurt anybody again. And this just really highlights the author's value of humanity coming together as a whole to better everyone's circumstances rather than going through the senselessness of fighting wars in order to dismantle entire countries and economies and politics. It causes so much pain and suffering to so many people, and this scene just shows us that there is another way. The saying, if you can dream it, you can do it, comes to mind. If we're able and capable to dream up better ways of doing something, then there's a way that we can execute that. Like someone had to dream of an airplane, right, in order to make an airplane. Someone had to dream of a phone call in order to make a phone call. So that's kind of the point, and that he experienced so much tragedy and so much fucked up shit in war that he was daydreaming of a way to solve it. And the answer that he came up with was coming together as one group to alleviate all of this pain. And I just love him. I love a good leftist. So while at war, Billy meets several men along the way. We have Edgar Derby, who is considered too old for war at this time. I think he was 44. He's a teacher, he's very sound, and has a good head on his shoulders. At one point, a US trader, who is now a Nazi, offers the prisoners food in exchange for turning into a Nazi and leaving the US. And Edgar gives a little speech about how he would rather die with dignity than sell his soul to the devil. Around the time an entire city is burned to the ground, Edgar was arrested for stealing a teapot. They take him to trial for stealing and they shoot him by a firing squad. And this just drives again the point that war has no rules and makes literally no sense. If anyone should be facing justice, it should be the people who ordered the wiping out of an entire city, not one man who stole a teapot. Another man he met along the way is Roland Weary. He's a young kid who was bullied and ditched when he was younger. This made him befriend lonely people and then beat them up before they even had the opportunity to ditch him and hurt him. He was an extremely fucked up individual. He walked around with a crude picture of a woman and a horse. He owned a lamp that replicated a torture chamber and walked around with a knife that made it impossible for the wound to heal because of its shape. At one point, he started beating Billy up just before they were captured by the Nazis. The Nazis were so shocked as to why one US soldier would be trying to kill another US soldier. It's very symbolic of our culture in general, I think, how we fight against each other and we are not as united as we claim to be. But he ends up having some type of irrational grudge toward Billy and wants to get back at him somehow. He died in the war. And then we have Paul, who comes in. He's another guy that Billy meets, and he picks up where Roland just left off. Paul is unstable and aggressive. He had about a quart of precious gems he had taken from dead people. He was good friends with Roland and was determined to avenge his death and kill Billy in the future. Billy knows this, and because he time travels, he sees that when he's old, Paul does successfully kill him, and Billy is completely at peace with it since he has adopted the aliens' view on living and dying. The aliens are from a planet called Tralfamador. They take Billy from Earth through a time warp so that he could be on their planet for years and be away from Earth for only a microsecond. The Tralfamadorians were 2 feet tall, green, shaped like Plumber's friends, and like, what's that called? A plunger. They actually look like plungers. They had suction cups on the ground. Their shafts were extremely flexible and usually pointing to the sky. On top of each shaft was a little hand with green eyes in its palm. The Tralfamadorians communicate telepathically, sending out thought waves to other aliens. They were friendly and could see in 4 dimensions. They can look at all the different moments just the way we can look at a stretch of the Rocky Mountains. They can see how permanent all the moments are, and they can look at any moment that interests them. They think humans are wrong in thinking that one moment follows another, that once a moment is gone, it's gone forever. They see humans not as 2-legged creatures, but as millipedes with baby legs on one end and old people legs on the other. There's no beginning, no middle, no end, no suspense, no causes, no effects, but many marvelous moments seen all at one time. So when Billy's on their planet, They explain these things to him, and he starts to adopt that in his human life. And I think this notion that time is existing right now and that the past is also existing and the future is also currently existing is supposed to give us, the readers, a sense of comfort. It's less daunting and sad to recall the past if you can tell yourself that it's not over, it's still going on. The future becomes less daunting because that is happening right now or is predetermined somehow, and suggests that we should just succumb to life as a matter of fact, rather than trying to manipulate or change or feel bad about how it goes. Billy sees all future moments coming, so they're less impactful and harmful. When someone passes away, he finds comfort in knowing that they're existing elsewhere in the past rather than thinking their time has come to an end. And same with his own death. He's totally okay with Paul killing him. Billy had no qualms about it at all. I think what I'm describing and what the author was trying to convey is some variation of radical acceptance, just existing and being, no matter the circumstances, in order to survive and to be at peace through all that is life. Ultimately, I believe that Billy's time traveling is actually a way to disassociate from life, whether it's daydreaming about his future or recalling his past. I think it gave him a moment to exit real life and reflect on his past, ground him into the realities of life in a more summative way, not just in the present moment he was living in, and have him daydream about his future. I can't finish the episode without mentioning the phrase, "so it goes." Kurt used this sentence, it feels like, several times on each page. Anytime he described a tragedy or something ironic, he would add, "so it goes," afterwards. I think this was a way to normalize and really drive the point that sad shit is inevitable, and so it goes, it being life. Sad shit happens, and we keep it moving. Early on in the book, Billy wrote to the Air Force asking for details on what happened at the bombing of Dresden. Billy wanted to know who ordered it, how many planes did it, why they did it, what the results had been, etc. The Air Force replied to that, saying that the info was top secret. Toward the end of the book, years later, his hospital mate says that they kept it a secret because they knew it wasn't such a wonderful thing to do. And I think that kind of ties into today's portion of El Chisme. The Dresden bombing really did happen, and it's controversial. Two United States Air Force reports defended the operation as the justified bombing of a strategic target, which they noted was a major rail transport and communication center housing 110 factories and 50,000 workers in support of the German war effort. Several researchers assert that not all communication infrastructures were targeted, and neither were the extensive industrial areas which were located outside the city center. Critics of the bombing have asserted that Dresden was a cultural landmark with little strategic significance, and that the attacks were indiscriminate area bombings and were not proportionate to military gains. Some have claimed that the raid constituted a war crime. I want to get into some facts about the current US Army, more specifically how they target the youth, poor schools, and intentionally marginalized people. I can't help myself. I feel like I was looking through my list of like all my podcasts that I have, and literally not one is like a happy one. Even the happy books, I still find a way to talk about like racism, discrimination, marginalized people. This is who I am. I don't know what's wrong. Like, something's wrong with me. Like, I don't know why I do this. But in an article written in Teen Vogue, of all places, by Adrienne Corcione, titled "The Military Targets Youth for Recruitment, Especially at Poor Schools," it talks about how the sooner young people join, the more likely they are to stay and build a career. Modern day recruiters sell the idea of an experience that often resonates more with poorer students because for many, service can mean a free ride to college that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. In 2022, a group of 19 Republican representatives sent a letter saying that Biden's plan to cancel up to $10,000, making under $75K a year, is removing any leverage the Department of Defense has to recruit people wishing to access higher education but who can't afford it. Like, they're saying the fucked up shit out loud. Republicans want people to be poor so they can have people be so desperate for higher education and to alleviate the pain that poverty causes that they're willing to sign up to war to kill other poor people across the ocean. Like it's just like they're saying it out loud. I can't. For kids who join the military, there's often a signing bonus. An enlistee can accrue up to $6,000 through the Army's Future Soldiers program. You don't collect it until you go to boot camp, but it's that kind of incentive that, for someone who's low income, makes the military look like a path out of poverty. The term poverty draft came about in the early 1980s to describe a draft-like system that pushes intentionally marginalized people into enlisting because society denies them access to jobs, income, and educational alternatives in their communities. In 2017, a Department of Defense survey of young people shows that 49% of respondents indicated that if they were to join the military, one reason for doing so would be to pay for future education. Some other reasons to join would be access to healthcare and citizenship. For Lo Malo, the book didn't follow a normal flow of a book with background info, then a climax, a resolution. The narrator even mentions in the book that because of the topics being shared, there was no need to follow the normal flow of a book. I appreciate the book for what it is, honestly. I liked it, but it's unique and strange. I personally wouldn't read these types of books regularly, but it's a nice change of scenery. I expected it to be more sci-fi, with one of the main characters being an alien. They didn't have a huge role. Yes, they were impactful, but the aliens didn't participate much in the book, and I personally would have enjoyed that. Kind of like in House of the Cerulean Sea, and also Remarkably Bright Creatures, where the octopus is an actual character. Like, I would have liked that if an alien was a character. But other than that, I liked it. Other books by Kurt Vonnegut that I want to read next would be Sirens of a Titan, which is a comic science fiction that involves issues of free will, omniscience, and the overall purpose of human history. Much of the story revolves around a Martian invasion of Earth. Like, hopefully, there's an alien character in there. The next couple of episodes are going to be on the following two books: Yellowface by R.F. Kuang and Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. So feel free to read those ahead of these next few episodes. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. New episodes are uploaded on Friday mornings. You can also follow me on social media and YouTube at Chicklet Podcast. And remember, if you have any book recommendations, send them my way. Thank you for listening.